You're listening to a Mamamia podcast.
Mamamia acknowledges the traditional owners of land and waters that this podcast is recorded on. Hello and welcome to Mamamia Out Loud. It's what women are actually talking about on Wednesday, the 13th of December. I'm Holly Wainwright.
She's sick. Can you hear it? I'm Mia Freedman.
And I'm Jessie Stevens.
And look, I have been in a COVID bubble for a few days, so I'm not actually sure what anybody is talking about, except in my strange fever dreams. But I'm trusting you two to bring me up to date on it, and this is what we have agreed to discuss. It's that time again, when school final exam results flood in and we celebrate the top 0.1%. But this year, even the brainiest are turning away from uni. Why? Also, by Roman Empire, perhaps related to fever dreams, is a relationship theory I've been working on based on Ben Affleck's two very different wives. Does it hold? And is refusing to shop the ultimate late 2023 flex? But first, Mia.
In case you missed it, having a baby will not cure your endometriosis. A research study that's come out this week has found that almost 90% of endometriosis patients have been told that pregnancy reduces symptoms, despite the fact there's no evidence that it does.
I always thought when they said that it was because during pregnancy you don't get a period. But apparently it wasn't. It's like you're actually assured that once you deliver that baby, ongoing your symptoms will be reduced. And that's what it's found, is that there is absolutely no evidence that that's the case.
There is none. There's no cure. Endo affects at least 1 in 9 women and girls. Not only will getting pregnant not cure or even necessarily alleviate any of your symptoms of endo, but this study has shown that there are actually often profound and negative patient impacts from this advice. And it says impacts range from planning for pregnancy, hastening the making of major life decisions, eroding trust with healthcare professionals, worsening mental health, straining relationships. So people are making the decision to get pregnant as a way to reduce symptoms of a disease that can't be helped by pregnancy. Having a baby is hard enough for everyone who hasn't had one. You don't really want to be doing it for that reason alone if you're not ready.
It's not a health decision, because the funny thing about pregnancy as a thing that happens to your body is that it results in a human that will be there afterwards. That's a big decision that you don't just want to make on the basis of pain. But it just feels like it's like someone coming in with an issue, you know, with their urinary tract and going, well, if you stop drinking water, then you'll wee less. And it's like, I feel as though that's not the cure. I feel like we're not looking enough at the actual, and this is the thing, there was a great quote in it about how gynos that you go to are often faced with a lot of women who come to them who are keen to get pregnant, who might have issues with their fertility. So their view of where women are at is a little skewed. And so then when someone comes in presenting with endometriosis, they're like, have you tried getting pregnant? And it's like, that's not the cure for everything.
We've got more details about this story and some amazing case studies, including a 13-year-old girl who was given the pregnancy advice by a doctor. We'll put a link in the show notes to that story on Mamamia.
Tomorrow, Year 12 students around Australia will receive their ATAR, their Australian Tertiary Admission Rank. And ultimately, as the name suggests, the mark is about admission to university. But this year, things are a little different. According to the Sydney Morning Herald, Year 12 applications through the University Admission Centre are at their lowest level in a decade. Why? Well, the shift is being attributed to the high cost of living, a strong...
'Cause he lives. A strong job market, and the increase in the cost of an actual university degree. So because we're in an era of high inflation...
How much do they cost?
Well, a uni degree, I think my uni degree now would cost about $45,000.
Whoa.
But the difference is that when I went into university in 2009, there wasn't sky-high levels of inflation. So the issue now is that because inflation is so high, it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So the advantage of being, you know, in a family where perhaps you can pay for your university up front is a lot greater than it was when I went to university. Year 12 students are looking to either defer their studies or go straight into work. Holly, do you think this might be a little bit corrective, or could it mean that certain kids, maybe who come from families with less money or maybe regional, rural kids, are being discouraged from going to uni due to the cost?
I think it's both those things. I think that in some ways, as we talked about going to uni or not going to uni, Jessie is the only one of the three of us who did go to uni. And
at least I tried, Hole.
Yeah, at least you tried.
Do I get any points for that?
I did go to study. I just didn't go to uni. I just didn't get a degree. But the thing is that I think that what's shifted possibly in recent generations is an assumption that everybody who can should.
Yeah.
That it is the middle class benchmark that kids go to uni, whether they know exactly what they want to study, whether they don't, whether it is something that they absolutely need to do to get into the field they want, or whether it isn't, that just going to uni is something you should do. And when it is so expensive, that is obviously problematic. My view is that obviously, as previously discussed, that there are many ways to be successful and that we need to let go of these very strict academic criteria of deciding who's smart and who isn't in lots of ways. But the problem comes, of course, when there are kids from not even disadvantaged, but just backgrounds that, I mean, most families cannot fork out $45,000.
No, but to be clear for those who don't know, you don't have to pay it up front. You can, but otherwise you have HECS debt, which is the higher education something. And I assume it's the same in every state, that there is the ability to buy now, pay later, essentially, the afterpay of university. But there is interest to pay on that debt.
Yeah, and that burden is always going to be higher on people whose parents can't help them pay it, whether it's upfront or later.
Absolutely.
Right? So the question is whether it's worth going into that kind of debt, you know. And I think that that's an interesting conversation. The thing I'm always struck by at this time of year, and it always gets my goat for various reasons, is it's like we have a moment in time where we celebrate academic excellence. There will be a million articles, there already have been over the past few weeks, about the kids who got the top scores, and we celebrate them. And I'm always conflicted about that, because in some ways I recognize that at this time of year we celebrate the kids who are good at exams in the same way that at many other times of year we celebrate the kids who are good at kicking footballs and running quickly and lots of other things, right? But we sort of put such a high value on it that it's like we think it's the only form of success. And the average HSC mark, and I know HSC is only New South Wales, is in the 70s, right? That's the average mark that most kids will be getting tomorrow. If you read the media, you would not think that. You would think that if you do not get a mark in the very high 90s, you are doomed. And I just wish we would rewrite that narrative.
You know, I'm about to have my second child get those results and have that, you know, number attached to the last 13 years of their life in some ways, but then also not. When I read those stories in the paper, and we'll get to that in a second, I see that as the extraordinary, exceptional end of the bell curve. And we've got a live example to study here in the studio, because there was one of these articles about you, Jessie Stevens.
There was, and I will defend surprisingly, those articles.
Surprise.
You know, I didn't go to a selective school or anything. And at my school, what got you credit was being really good at sport, right? And there were lots of sport assemblies and stuff. There aren't a lot of times where we celebrate sort of academic excellence, at least not publicly. And so this is the one day of the year where we go, these are the kids. And I actually don't often think it's academic excellence as much as it is, these are the kids who work really hard.
For a really long
time.
Well, maybe it is and maybe it isn't. Like, I mean, of course it is. And I agree with you, as I said at the beginning, like, I don't think there's anything wrong with celebrating academic excellence, but it comes with a lot more cultural baggage than that. And also it's a very specific measure of intelligence. It rewards the kids who are good at exams, good at assessments, understand what is required of them in a very specific way.
But so do the Olympics.
Yeah, of course they do. I agree. But everybody isn't expected to compete in the Olympics, and nobody cares whether or not I made the Olympics or my kid makes the Olympics.
Everybody has to do sport, so I disagree with that. And the Olympics are the people who are the best of the best, and the people who are in the paper, like Jessie was, are the best of the best. And I have no problem at a particular measure, in the same way that the Olympics are a particular measure of other particular skills. But what I'm most interested in, Jessie, is you wrote a story a few years ago, actually, which is going viral again now, about the worst part about being one of those people.
And you see it every year, and we're about to see it again, is the expectations that are then placed on the shoulders of those people who got that mark.
Is that how you felt?
Yes.
You and Claire?
And then you go, and maybe this was specific to my experience, you then become, and this is, I think, where the university question comes in, you become a very, very small fish in a very, very, very big pond, and you get an enormous shock because then you enter the real world. So what's happening with universities, I think, as well, which I'm worried about, is universities aren't in a good place. Like, there's a lot of funding being cut, the kind of middle management, a lot of lecturers, tutors, they're not being given any time. So if you're someone who loves to learn, going to university can be an incredibly disappointing experience at the moment because people do not have the time to foster that kind of, like you do in a school where you get noticed or you get feedback. And it's not the fault of the people who are lecturing or teaching. It's that they have to publish journals. It's that, you know, their pay isn't very good at the moment. It's that they have 60 students that they're meant to, you know, mark these essays. Like, it's a mess at the moment.
Isn't that also a symptom of what we started off talking about, which was everybody has to go to uni, right? So if you look at the percentage of the population who went to university in the 1960s, say, versus now, it would be vastly different, right? So the role of universities has changed enormously. Obviously, of course, you know, there's a certain money-making aspect to universities now that puts them under a different kind of pressure. There are lots of different kind of courses. So the whole thing has shifted, and that's like the model hasn't kept up with what society has demanded of it.
No,
and if
exactly.
it was just a place for people who love to learn, couldn't agree with you more. I don't want it to sound in any way like I am devaluing academia. Like, both my parents are academics. They would shoot me. Like, I am not. Like, I think there is no question that there's a place for that. My issue is more it being held up as something that is what everybody should do. And I think we need to really broaden out our measurements of success, including success at school. Because you can have an incredibly successful school career, as it were, experience, and not land in the top 10%. For your HSC.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
I feel like at this time of year, I agree that the sun should shine on excellence, and I agree that it often is shining on other kids. But I just feel enormously for all the kids who are landing good but very average marks, who are kind of being viewed with a bit of pity when school is for all kinds of reasons.
I just don't buy this. I just don't think they are being viewed with pity.
That's
unless
you
it's by
don't sit in the same meetings that I sit in, where everybody who's in their 30s sits around comparing their HSC scores.
No.
Yes, they do. They do. Like, people still talk about it like a badge of honor. Jessie, and I love you, Jessie, but I have heard you discussing other people's HSC scores and ATARs with a level of judgment. Not judgment in a like, oh, I thought they were smarter than that. But
No,
like,
often the other way.
it means something. Like it means something.
Did you know Dave Sharma got 100? I don't know why I find that interesting, but I do.
See what I mean?
He's a
It is
politician.
held up as a mark of intelligence, and I would argue it's a mark of intelligence to a point, but that there are many, many other ways to measure intelligence.
Australians have a thing about celebrating the tall poppies, right? We get our backs up, and you even see it in the comments. Everyone's like, who do you think you are? I'll give the smart kids who are probably bullied for being a nerd their day.
Smart kids. You know why, though? That's baked into the system. And I guess one of the reasons I get head up about this is it's very different from the culture I grew up in. The very nature of ATAR being a ranking builds competition, right? Really, really stiff competition. And I think that's why, like, everybody knows where they sit. Everybody knows what their ranking is. As we discuss all the time, Mia likes to rank all things at all times. And so it does breed this obsession with, am I better than you? Are you better than me?
I will say that there's a brilliant book actually written by Leah about who gets to be smart, and it's about the education system in Australia and disparity. And while, you know, there'll be a certain demographic of kids who get these results, and I will say there are kids from public selective schools and everything.
It's just one measure.
It is one measure, but her point, I think, really applies to the university thing, which is that it's not just if you get the mark to get into university. HECSTET is great, but if you are a kid who is regional or rural and you want to go to university, you need to pay rent, which is exorbitantly high at the moment. Cost of living probably means you can't make that move, and that's what they're saying, is that makes me sad. I think we can all agree that every kid who gets the mark and wants to go to university should be given the opportunity that makes a better Australia.
100%. And the thing that's interesting is that there's a certain kind of school that takes it for granted that they're always going to get a few kids in that top stream.
Yeah.
And then in a lot of other schools, more ordinary schools, it's so rare that happens. So when I say I don't think that we should always nationally be celebrating, I think that in some schools it needs to be celebrated way more. But it just always seems to be repeating a pattern that it's the same kind of kids in the same kind of school getting the same kind of recognition. Forgive me, out louders, because perhaps proving why my ATAR would never be as high as Jessie's, there's a celebrity theory I just can't stop thinking about. Perhaps it's my Roman Empire. I'm going to set it out for you, right? Jennifer Lopez and Jennifer Garner are both famous women in their 50s. They're both very impressive in their fields. J-Lo is J-Lo, and Garner is a very successful actress, a Save the Children ambassador, and a baby food entrepreneur. They're both around in the culture a lot right now. Lopez was honoured last week at a big fancy Women in Hollywood event, and Garner's on the promo trail for Family Switch, a feel-good festive movie. And yet, in lots of ways, their public images could not be more different. Scroll through Jennifer Garner's Insta, and she is there doing like goofy TikTok dances in flannel pajamas and Ugg boots. She's often in a kitchen making something wholesome.
I've heard about zoodles. I've read about zoodles. People have talked about zoodles. I haven't had a lot of faith, and I want to try them. Okay, we really do need to start with the sauce.
She's on Vogue saying about how she has no time for skincare, really, because she's such a busy mum. And J-Lo, well, as discussed, is J-Lo. I don't really know what else to say.
She wouldn't
about
describe
that.
herself as goofy, I don't think.
Not really. She wore a breastplate to the Women in Hollywood's awards last week, and I sort of feel like that was just to protect the crowd from her emanating, like, J-Lo-ness that just pours out at all times.
It was a cropped breastplate with some underboob, actually.
And yet, both these women have been married to Ben Affleck. So this brings me to my theory, and I know I've been locked in a fever dream, but I need you to help tell me whether or not it stands. Does Ben Affleck's choice in wives, let's remember he and Garner were together for more than 10 years and they've got 3 kids, and he and J-Lo famously were together and then they broke up and now they're back together. Does it prove that there is no such thing as a type?
I don't think it proves anything, except that he really likes marrying people called Jennifer. Like literally
Maybe that's his type.
I would say that that's his type. So we don't know what they're really like. And their values could be very, very similar, the two Jennifers. So outwardly they could present very differently and seem like very different people. And clearly there are some big differences in them because Jennifer Garner is clearly not interested in clothes, is very, I won't say introverted, but she doesn't like being famous particularly, whereas J-Lo is just the ultimate celebrity, like just revels in it.
Yeah,
it's
very
glorious
different upbringing.
to watch.
From what I know about Jennifer Garner, a little bit more conservative, not politically,
Yeah.
but just like in the way that she carries herself.
Yeah, I think the word would be modest.
Modest, yes.
Modest.
It's very sweet.
Yeah, which sounds judgmental to J-Lo, but it's not. It's more just that idea of modesty. And of course, everyone just thinks about all the people that they've dated, right? And thinking, do I have a type? I had a type in my teens and early 20s, guys that didn't have jobs, guys that were really directionless. Now, I think that's probably not that unusual for dating young people. That's kind of what you do, and everyone's kind of figuring themselves out at that time. But what's interesting is that the person I married, the person I've been with for almost 30 years, is the opposite of that type.
Would you describe him as your type now?
I don't know what my type is. I think my type is probably swarthy Jewish guys.
If we followed Ben Affleck's life as a template, that would mean that if you and Jason broke up tomorrow, you would go back to dating those guys because that's what he did, right? He was like dating the hot, sexy, exciting, high fame octave, like, you know, woman, and then he chose the good option, like not the good option, that sounds judgmental, but a very different option, like a safer option perhaps, a more steady option. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think that what could also be said is the person that you date after a definitive relationship will often be an antidote or the polar extreme of that. Would you say that's true, Jessie?
Yeah, I wonder if that's it. It's like, or maybe this is confirming the type, which is that he tried on something else and then he got back with the person he was with sort of in his 20s, which I think is, I don't know, a few people can probably relate to that. But I reckon that types are also about trying out new versions of yourself on people. So I definitely had a type, and I think that you feel safe in a relationship you've had many times before. So I would get into a relationship with someone who was similar in terms of maybe extroverted, really outwardly sort of funny, partied a lot, fun, all of those things. Bad boy, definitely.
Yep.
And then every time I would feel chemistry with someone who had those things because it was familiar. And I was mistaking familiarity for chemistry.
I also think that type of person is exciting.
Yes, is really exciting.
And that you can sometimes
be confusing.
With chemistry.
And then I realised the difference between chemistry and compatibility, which I think often they're completely different. And so you go and you date someone outside your type, and I would argue that you shouldn't marry your type. If you're going to have a long-term relationship, often it's better to date outside your type because you end up loving them more and more every day. You might start seeing them and the initial, not that the chemistry isn't there, but it feels really different.
Well, because you don't recognise it. It's
you
unfamiliar.
You don't recognise it.
Yeah.
And then
that makes sense.
Holly, what do you think? Is Brent your type?
No, he's not. Like, he's not the type that I dated up until I met him. And for a while, I very much resisted our relationship because he wasn't my type. And so my experience echoes yours, Jessie. But what I think when I look at Ben and this celebrity example that, as I say, I spend way too much time thinking about, because I just often, I follow both Jennifer Garner and J-Lo on Instagram, and I just find myself every time I look at them going, how can he be married to these two so different women? But one of the things I think is that I agree with you about going against type, but there's a suspicion I have. We may have all had this experience with somebody we were dating, that they will revert to type because maybe who you're blueprinted into being sexually attracted to, you always are. You can fight it, but it's always there.
I know. I do wonder that with Ben Affleck. And then you think, if I was Jennifer Garner, how would I feel, right? Because I've been Jennifer Garner in terms of watching someone that I was with go on and marry someone, and you stalk them on Instagram and you go, how interesting. She's so different to me. Should I be offended or not? Like, do you think Jennifer Garner looks at it and goes, what the hell? This is so bizarre. Or do you think she'd be comforted if it was someone more like her?
This is what I hope. I hope she laughs her head off. I hope she laughs her head off with her friends because, as Mia said at the beginning, she's right. Just because they present very differently, they probably both have a lot in common. Clearly, Jennifer Garner's career is nothing to be sneezed at. They're both clearly ambitious women, objectively very beautiful women. Jennifer Garner with, Alias, all that. It's not like for a minute I think we're pretending that, she's some kind of girl next door.
Yeah.
But that's kind of how the culture has presented them. I hope that Jennifer Garner has some wines with her girlfriends and just laughs her head off at Ben filming J-Lo in her breastplate on the red carpet at the Hell Women in Hollywood thing, and just goes, oh my God, I'm so glad I don't have to wear a breastplate.
If you want to make Out Loud part of your routine 5 days a week, we release segments on Tuesdays and Thursdays just for Mamamia subscribers. To get full access, follow the link in the show notes, and a big thank you to all our current subscribers.
I have a question. How many pairs of underpants do you own? Jessie?
I own more than I can ever find in my drawer. Like today I went to my drawer and I was like, I swear I own 15 pairs of underpants.
15?
And I could only find 2. And I thought, I don't know where they hide. Holly, how about you?
Easily 15. Probably more like 20. Agree with Jessie. I seem to cycle just through 5 over and over again. But I have a whole big basket full of knickers in my wardrobe.
How about you, Mia?
Probably got about 50.
Really?
Yeah. In a recent interview, Sarah Wilson, who is an author and an activist, she said that she has 3 pairs of underwear. And she says that the gusset's gone quite saggy and she just...
The word gusset isn't used enough.
I know. She said also that she makes them last years. Like she's had these undies for years. And she travels the world and she said she can actually make do with as little as 2 pairs. You just wash one in the shower and hang it up overnight.
I'm impressed. I just feel like her period must be like clockwork because I have really destroyed a few pairs of underpants with a surprise.
I hope all 3 pairs of her undies hopefully are black, or if they didn't start out that way, they probably are now. But what's interesting is that she spoke a little bit more about, it's not just undies that she doesn't like to buy. She doesn't like shopping. She's trying not to buy things. She said in the Times magazine, it's amazing when you start to live this way. When I see people buy a nice car or expensive jewelry, I could get upset and jealous, but I don't. I wish people could know how much joy they could have if they release themselves. Shopping makes people sad in the end. end. And yet we do it because it is an addictive, vicious cycle. We are dangled the next new thing and we will keep going back hoping that the next hit will be the one that satisfies us. I thought this was really interesting. There's another person on social media, Jan Fran, a media personality, who says in her Insta bio that she hasn't bought any new clothes in 5 years and counting. And I was really interested about this idea of anti-consumerism and not shopping as a form of identity. Mm-hmm. Clearly, it's not one I'll be taking on anytime soon.
I'm obsessed.
But what do you think?
I love it. I'm in awe. I am influenced.
It's like being a shopping vegan.
We need more people like this because the problem is that the way that fashion works is that it's so cyclical that obviously every season you're going, I need this print or I need this cut or I need this pair of shoes. And then that's in for a season. And then it goes for a few years and you go, oh, I should probably throw that out because it's not cool anymore. And then the second you throw it out, it's cool again. So you have to buy again. So it's like this capitalist cycle where we've got wardrobes full of stuff that we don't wear. I saw these images of a desert in Chile called Atacama, where they just dump thousands of tons of clothes. It is apocalyptic. And if you look at the stats on, fossil fuels and pollution, the United Nations has said that the fashion industry is the second most polluting of all industries, just after oil and gas. So what these people are doing is making it cool to wear vintage. I have a cousin who's really cool and she's maybe, let's say 23, 24. She does not buy new clothes. Swimsuit. Didn't buy it new. And I just am totally in awe because there's work involved in that.
Looking great in op shop clothes is a very specific kind of, I'm going to say it, privilege. It is a specific kind of privilege. Like I've got a friend also who is one of the coolest people I know and she always looks amazing and never wears anything new. Jan Fran always looks amazing and never wears anything new. I walk into an op shop, I put on a polyester blouse, I look like my gran. I look like my gran. On her way to church. It's like, it's not hot, it's not cool.
I have an auntie who's a fashion designer and she, for years, has said that she doesn't do what's in fashion. Like she rejects what's in fashion. And her thing, her label, she always says, you want to own it till the day you die. And I don't want this to disintegrate. I want this to be sent through generations, right? The problem with that is the cost. And so if you want to buy something that isn't...
That's beautifully made and sustainable.
And you can wear for the rest of your life, like a really nice blazer or a really nice like cut of pants, then you're going to pay a premium for that a lot of people can't necessarily fork out. And that's the thing with a lot of sustainable clothes. And I've found myself trying to buy, I'm going to say like boring clothes, like black, white, beige, and really simple styles because I'm like, well, this won't go out of fashion so I can wear it. Like the top I'm wearing now, I've had for 10 years because I'm like, well, it's just nothing.
Oh, I'd never be able to tell that.
Mia, do you feel a little bit shamed by these anti-consumerist warriors?
Of course I do. I'm not in a bad way. Like you do you. You know what I mean? Like if you don't want to buy clothes, if it's genuinely, Sarah says that she hates going shopping. A lot of people do. She's very conscious about the planet. I think that's so commendable. I think that's great. I choose to support the economy and I'm being a bit facetious, but also people make different decisions about their environmental impact or their economic spending. For example, I don't travel very much. Some people travel the world all the time. I'm not saying I'm better than someone who travels the world because I don't or anything like that, but I'm just saying that there are a lot of different things to consider and it is also tricky. I mean, Sarah's also lucky in that, I'm not being critical at all, but like Sarah gets to dress up in lovely clothes for photo shoots a lot and maybe she doesn't even enjoy that.
Yes, and this is kind of back to what Holly was saying about privilege and I remember this coming up in the Shein conversation that we had. Like I find that quite vile,
about
right?
That
like
label. There's another one now, Temu, T-E-M-U, where you buy things like for $1. It's terrifying.
It's terrifying, but there's been a really interesting pushback from the plus size community that are saying, yeah, but these clothes stock our size. Yeah. Like they can't walk into a vintage op shop. Too. So I think that there is a privilege in being able to walk into those shops and there's something on the rack that fits you. And I think you're right because we're all making decisions. I'll make 5 decisions today that are not good for the planet. But then there are some people who drive electric cars or like you make your choices. And I think the clothing industry and the fashion industry as a whole needs to make some pretty big reforms. I don't know. I do like the change though. I do like the idea that on a consumer level, can we make it cool to not buy a new wardrobe every season. And that's why I'm just in awe of this push.
You made the joke, Mia, that they're like fashion vegans. I feel very much the same way that I do about vegans, which is that I think deep down, I know they're right. They're 100% right. But it's a very difficult switch to make. What Sarah is spot on about in that quote you read out, though, is our constant pursuit of thinking that buying the thing will make us happy.
Makes me happy.
I have a few items of clothing in my wardrobe that make me really happy, right? Like really happy. Whenever I wear them, I feel great. When I look at them, I feel great. I don't resent a penny I spent on them. But to chase the high of those like 3 garments, I have run down a whole lot of like regret and spender's remorse and ecological angst to chase that high. It's really interesting when you kind of look at it that way, where you think, you know, as you said, Mia, we all have the things that sustain us, make us happy, nourish us, whatever. You've always been very nourished by clothes. But it can also make you feel a bit sick. You know what I mean? Like when you overdo it.
Yeah, that's true. Something that Jessie does a lot, and you do as well, Hol, and people in my family do it too, is renting things. Because I think that, you know, special occasion dresses, this idea of buying something to wear to one occasion and now because it's all over social media, you can never wear it again. Renting and recycling and borrowing from friends and stuff, that is such a great thing to do. Yeah, highly recommend that. I think you've talked about that in a subscriber episode.
Yes, we've got ones that we recommend specifically. Dress Hire Australia is great. There are lots of lady startups that do it, and you can find a dress that you really like that you absolutely can't afford, because this is a time of year as well where you do go kind of a little bit out of control with the spending and thinking you need something new to wear every time. But swaps within friends. And the other thing I'm going to give a shout out to, which is where I live, is Facebook Marketplace. And Jan Fran has actually said that for her little one, all the clothes, all the toys, Facebook Marketplace.
So if you want to get an insight into my wardrobe and all the things that I do own and my fashion rules and how my style's changed, I am a guest on our fashion podcast, Nothing to Wear. It's a fairly new show. I think it's top of the arts charts at the moment. I've done an episode. You'll get all the goss in my wardrobe. We'll put a link in the show notes. Before we go, a quick recommendation that's not going to cost you a cent. It's a thing to do. It's actually a question to ask. It's a trend that's going viral on TikTok at the moment, and it's called Name a Woman. It's very simple. Go up to a man in your life today and with no context, just say to him, name a woman. And some of the responses that men are giving are both funny and surprisingly insightful. Here are a few examples.
I need you to do me a favor and name a woman.
Susan B. Anthony. Zendaya.
Becky.
Judi Dench.
Joan of Arc.
Michelle Obama.
Hillary Clinton.
Hillary Clinton.
Hillary Clinton.
For some reason, a lot of the men straight away say Hillary Clinton. And what I love about this trend, and you can also do it to women because that's really funny, very few men will name a woman that they know or the woman asking them the question. It's really, really funny.
It clearly betrays something about you. It's almost like they think it's a feminism test. So they're like, Hillary is a feminist, and listening to them name prominent feminists as well. It's like...
I just went into Brent's sickbed and asked him, name a woman. I said, don't give me any shit about this. I'm just asking you something. First thing that comes to your mind. Do you know what he said?
What?
Lady Gaga.
He's also in a fever dream. Why Lady Gaga?
I have absolutely
I love that so much.
Maybe it's the lady.
And the funny thing is how they all panic a little bit.
Yeah.
Like that they know that it is a loaded question.
Yeah, yeah.
Which it kind of is, but you don't know what it's loaded with. Yeah. It's just funny.
If you're looking for something else to listen to, on yesterday's subscriber episode, we helped an Out Louder decide whether or not she should intervene when she reckons her daughter is about to make a really bad decision, the type of decision that might derail the rest of her life. We've talked about canon events on Mamamia Out Loud, and she thinks that her daughter is on the brink of her canon event and she's about to blow it all up. So we talk about whether you can interfere, how you might reorient her. It's very interesting. We do not agree. A link to that episode will be in the show notes.
Thank you for listening to Australia's #1 news and pop culture show. This episode was produced by Emeline Gazilas. The assistant producer is Tahli Blackman, with audio production by Leah Porges. Bye.
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 Shout out to any Mamamia subscribers listening. If you love the show and you want to support us, subscribing to Mamamia is the very best way to do it. There's a link in the episode description.